Hi, I'm Tom Nelson. I'll show you how to make a Kallitype print today. Kallitypes use light-sensitive iron and silver salts, and they're exposed with ultraviolet light. I'll take cotton rag paper and coat it with a sensitizing solution, then expose it through this digital negative. The Kallitype process was invented in the 19th century, and it's similar to platinum and palladium printing. It yields a long tonal scale and a pretty deep black. It's much less expensive than platinum and palladium as well. Let's get going.
First, you'll need some supplies and equipment. It's a short list. The right paper is essential. You need 100% cotton rag acid-free paper without alkaline buffering. I use Arches Platine, which works beautifully. Other papers I've heard are good are Crane's Platinotype, Stonehenge Rising, and Buxton Platinotype. The wrong paper will make it difficult or impossible to clear the unexposed emulsion. You need a source of ultraviolet light. Depending where you live, you can use the sun, but it's hard to get consistent results. Many people make their own exposure units using strips of ultraviolet LEDs. I use a UV light made for curing adhesives. Ultraviolet light can hurt your eyes and cause cataracts. You'll need a pair of UV-safe goggles. While we're talking safety, you need gloves to protect your hands. The solutions are toxic to your skin and eyes. I use cheap exam gloves when mixing them and heavy rubber gloves when developing. Also, if you don't wear glasses, you should wear protective eyewear when handling silver nitrate. It will cause blindness if you get it in your eyes. I use a yellow bug light as a safe light. It's pretty bright and it won't fog the sensitizer. You can coat with a rod or a brush or both. I use both. A rod pulls an even coat of sensitizer across the paper without roughing up the surface. A brush is helpful for evening things out. You can buy solid glass coating rods, but they're surprisingly expensive. I made my own with a piece of rigid plastic tubing on a wooden handle. I plugged the ends of the tube with silicone cement to keep the wetness out. Don't go cheap with your brush. Kallitypes are easily contaminated by rust, and cheap metal ferrules will cause problems. Many people avoid this with Japanese hake brushes, which have no ferrule, but the cheap ones shed hairs into the emulsion. I use a 2-inch Jack Richardson brush, and it works great. To get an even coating of sensitizer, you need to coat your paper on a flat surface. Anything flat and waterproof will do. I use a piece of plate glass. Keep in mind that spilled sensitizer will cause dark stains once it's exposed to light. You only need one tray for Kallitypes. I recommend you use a flat-bottom tray that lets you use small amounts of chemicals. You'll see why in part 2. Finally, the tap water for rinsing should be neutral or slightly acidic. Alkaline water will make the iron compounds impossible to clear. If you have any doubts about your water, get an inexpensive roll of pH test strips and test it. Kallitype is an iron-based process, and iron in your water will cause staining. If your tap water has much iron in it, Kallitypes are not for you. I'll talk about the specific chemicals as we get to them. Now it's on to preparing the paper.
I'm making light pencil marks on the edge of the paper. These will be the edges of the sensitizing solution that I'll apply. I'm going to coat a 9.5 by 12.5 inch area to give me a little extra space to position my 9 by 12 negative. Next, I'm using plain old Scotch magic tape to mask the paper. It gives a straight edge to my sensitizer and doesn't pull up the paper when I remove it. The edges of the tape are hard to see under safe light. I'm making pencil lines just inside the edge of the tape to show me where to spread the sensitizer. Now that the paper is marked up, it's time to coat it. I'm working under safe light here, and I've protected my hands with inexpensive exam gloves from the drugstore. The ferric oxalate I'm using is made for platinum printing and is slightly too concentrated. I add 4 drops of deionized water and 21 drops of ferric oxalate. I'm adding the same amount, 25 drops of 10% silver nitrate. Tween 20 is a wetting agent that helps the solution absorb into the paper. I just need 1 drop of that. Ammonium dichromate adds contrast, and I add 1 drop of that as well. I start my coating with the rod. I make sure my sensitizer is completely mixed, then I pour a line down at the top of the page. I give between 2 and 4 passes with the rod until all parts of the paper are covered. The rod and beaker go into the sink to be washed. Now I switch to the brush and even everything out. Lately I've been having trouble with little bits of dust adhering to the wet paper. I've found I can pick them out with the tip of the brush and it won't leave a mark. If I leave them in, they cast a shadow and cause white spots on the print. I leave the wet paper for about half a minute while I wash my utensils. I take the tape off, leaving a nice crisp edge. Now that I've coated my paper, I put it on a piece of paper toweling to dry, turn out the light, and leave the room. If you have questions about the process, leave them in the comments. Click on the link to see part 2 of this series.